Hey folks, Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a Round 7 summary, Operation Western Europe, and the battle continues on. The Japanese are becoming an unstoppable beast. They are now pushing into West Bengal, and they are now only one territory away. So next turn, if the Japanese choose, they can attack this KMT stack, which is or basically there's now, the Japanese are 2 territories away from Novosibirsk, which is the Russian pseudo capital if Moscow falls. The KMT did fly their fighter 2 spaces away down here to Sinking, and the KMT also liberated Yunnan. So just because they could have, but probably wasn't that smart. Japanese. But what are you going to do? When you're boxed in, you got nothing left, you may as well swing for the fences, I guess. I don't know. The Japanese did come up here and they did attack Russia. They captured 4 territories of Vladivostok, Amur, Soviet Far East, and Kamchatka, which activated the Mongolians, which are now sort of basically Russian units. So that money goes towards Russia, which Russia was not too unhappy with because they have all these sort of dark green figures now that can run around and play defense against the Japanese, because the Russians are spending all their money around their capital. So that's what happened there. The Japanese had some decisions to make what they're going to do with their navy in the Pacific. They decided to move it from this territory off of Fiji, off of Queensland. Didn't know exactly what they should do. They were nowhere near their own transport, so they couldn't take anything. And the Americans were sitting here at a naval base, which they destroyed. So that naval base, I didn't mark it, but it's gone. But the Americans could have attacked the small Japanese navy sitting off of the coast of Shanghai. There's a couple carriers. There's a double scramble of 6 fighters and a cruiser and about 5 destroyers. So it would have been a combined attack with the British going first, which would have been mutual destruction. The Americans would have won, assuming the Japanese might not have scrambled, which would have put the American Navy in a spot to be then suicided by the Japanese, who built 5 submarines in the Yamato-class battleship, and they might have had whatever planes survived, which the Japanese would have sabotaged to wipe out the American fleet. So the Americans retreated back up here to, I believe this is Johnson Island, so with the British. So they're, actually, I guess they couldn't have destroyed their naval base if they moved 3 spaces. So let's say this naval base is still alive, because the Americans moved 3 spaces, so they obviously did not destroy it. Over here, the Japanese economy, I know there was a question about purchases, which is a little bit too much work for me to talk about purchases right now in the videos, but the Anzac, because the Americans liberated Dutch New Guinea and they get a couple NO bonuses, they're now at 15. The Americans over here are spending about $40 in the Pacific every turn. They purchased a couple destroyers, a cruiser, and a naval torpedo bomber, and a couple Marines. Their economy is at 129. The Japanese economy is at 113, so fairly healthy. Let's go over here in Russia. The Russians pushed north. They liberated Leningrad, and they still have probably a few more units than the Germans. So the Germans are playing defense down south. Neither force can basically, they're better on defense. So the Germans are playing defense in the territories they have, and the Russians are playing it safe, not to get too far from their capital, and also sacrifice their fast movers by pushing too far in any direction, which may put their forces, all their fast movers, their tanks and their mechs and all that stuff, it's all protected by infantry, but they're being very careful with it. The Germans, even though their economy is, I think, 73 next turn, or maybe it's 83, I can't remember. They don't have enough because they're fighting a two-front war, to be building, heavy tanks or even armor on the Eastern Front. So they're building artillery, Panzer Grenadiers, and infantry, which is not going to be enough to penetrate into Russia. So even though the Japanese, it's going to be up to the Japanese to secure as many victory cities as they can. Which, let's go over here. All the Japanese naval transports are sitting off the coast of Tokyo, basically because they're safe, so they can reload, rearm. And are they going to come down here and head towards Sydney or towards Hawaii? So the Australians are just building infantry back home. The British are building a couple there, so they've got maybe, I don't know, 20 units there. The American Air Force is there. So a bit of a standoff here happening on the Eastern Front. Let's go down to North Africa. The British did take Tobruk, so that was probably the biggest battle. The Italians lost about 15 units there. The British attacked with about 30, so overwhelming odds. And you can see they survived with quite a few, which now they built an air base here in Alexandria to protect their navy. So the Italians, what are they going to do with their navy? The British can't attack them next turn because they're not at a naval base, but the Italians could attack the British. Do they want to keep their navy? What do they want to do with it? We'll see. There's one Italian unit left here in this other Italian territory. If these remain under Italian or German or Japanese control, that in regards to Turkey, for it to become pro-allied, a few conditions have to be met. One of them is these territories have to become allied, and this guy has to die. Don't like saying that, but the plastic man has to die. And also Greece, Corinth and Crete have to remain pro-allied, and Greece has to be under allied control, and then Turkey becomes pro-allied. So there's a couple fighters here and some units. So do the British want to mess around with it? Definitely the Italians have done a very good job. They're just buying infantry now. They have totally stocked up in Turin, they have a major factory there, and also in Rome. So it is safe. Like the British, even though they've got 5 naval transports in the water, they're going to have to get a lot more. So we'll see what happens, but they're definitely keeping pressure on Rome. And what that's doing, it's preventing the Italians from fighting in Western Europe. They have to defend their capital, because if the Allies capture Rome, that means all the Italian units is a big thing that happens. But basically a lot of the Italian units flip and become allied, which the Germans definitely, and the Axis definitely don't want that. What's happening over here? They're playing ping pong. So the Germans last turn kicked out the Allies out of Bordeaux, and they lost quite a few units doing it. So Normandy was basically vacated. So the Allies did a massive landing there. There's over 20 units there. So each time this happens where the Germans kick them off Europe, they lose because they're attacking, and the Allies are because they're landing infantry, they're better at defending. So the Germans next turn can only attack them with less units than what's defending. So that's a problem. So maybe the Allies are finally there to stay, and if they're there to stay, that could present a problem because they don't have to remain in Normandy. They could jump on their transports and go hit Western Germany, which then opens up Berlin. So the Germans have to be careful. If they're going to lose anything, it's going to be Paris. They have to defend Berlin. They have to defend Western Germany, which, they're defending basically 3 territories, which the Allies next turn are going to be landing about between the Canadians and the British over, I think, 12 units, and the Americans are going to be landing 16 units. So it's not looking good for the Germans and the Italians in Western Europe or in the Med. And if the British can somehow annex Turkey, that is going to prevent or cause another front for the Germans have to defend down here, the southern flank there's 3 minor industrial complexes in Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary. So the Germans definitely can't ignore that. The British, it's worth doing it because that might help the Russians. It's just going to be another front that's going to pull units away from fighting in Russia. So the Americans and the Brazilians and the Free French are headed towards northern Algeria to try and take out this remaining Italian. So we'll see what happens there. The Americans are just building transports. They built that's that black chip there. That represents 5, so that's 6 artillery and 12 infantry. No, 6, 10 infantry. 10 infantry and 6 artillery. So that's and the Americans have all of Brazil under their control. So yeah, we'll see what happens in round 8. I think this might be a repositioning round. What are the Japanese going to do with their navy? They're going to have 2 navies. They're just going to park a navy off the coast here to prevent any Anzac Navy from being built. And while they take their large transport fleet, and probably they're going to head down and probably take a poke at Sydney. But that's going to be a few rounds away yet, and you're going to see the cleanup here as the Japanese are going to be pushing west into Russia and wipe out the KMT. And probably over here, are they going to be now pressing towards taking over all of India as the British here are marching up into Russian territory. They're now in the Caucasus. So do the Japanese take a poke at the Middle East, and then maybe the British, instead of going into Turkey, maybe they have to defend the Middle East, which is a 10 NO bonus, or 10 with 10 IPP to the British, 5 for the territories for controlling the whole Middle East, and they get a 5 NO bonus. So yeah, maybe the Japanese have to send some transports in that direction. So we'll see what happens. The British still have a navy over here, but the Japanese are building a second navy of their own. So maybe that navy ends up over here. We'll see what happens, and stay tuned.